No, it didn't say that. Well, thank you very much. All right, so today's lesson is about faith in a fiery furnace. And we all pretty well know this story from Daniel chapter 3, verses 19 through 28. And it talks about, in the pre-lesson story, about faith and what faith isn't. What are some of the descriptions on what faith isn't?
Trust in our belief.
A trust in our belief. Yeah, that's one thing it's not.
Trust in a certain outcome.
Trust in a certain outcome, as if we would know what the outcome is going to be.
That paragraph is really wonderful. I think we all tend to believe those things sometimes. This sentence, it isn't something we can build up in such a great amount that we control how God decides it happens. I just think we sometimes kind of try that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and faith isn't any of those things. When I read the first one, faith is not trust in our belief. Well, of course, faith is trust in God, but not in our belief. So I kind of had a little bit of issue with that, but it's not in any sense, that whole paragraph, that somehow we get to be in charge. We're good enough Christians, or we have enough faith, or we've done enough wonderful things that now we can somehow control God. Of course not. Of course not. No way. That doesn't happen. And then it goes on to say in the next paragraph, faith is an expression of utmost confidence in God himself. That even when we don't understand why something happened, and might be quite irritated about why something happened, faith would say, well, he's in charge. It's in his hands. It didn't work out the way you hoped for, or you prayed for, or whatever, but he's in charge. Whether it was a job offer, whether it was an illness, whatever. Our faith lets us know that God is in charge. And the same as the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it says there was a fireproof faith. Well, they had pretty good faith, didn't they? Yeah. And in the scripture preceding the scripture we're reading for this lesson, they say, we know he can, but we don't know if he will. We know that God could heal that person, stop that cancer, stop these wars, stop this famine, stop that. He could do all those things. But we don't know if he will. We don't know if it's his purpose to do those things. But we have faith that he's in charge. And so did the three in the furnace. We don't know that God's going to save us from this furnace and burning up, but he could. We had that much faith. So question number one, what is a fire that you've endured in your life? Heart surgeries?
I don't wish chemo on anyone. That stuff's nasty. And it affects you for the rest of your life.
Poison to kill poison.
It's only a half-life of 2 years. Well, we never fully get that. So, yeah, that was a fire.
And all of us have endured some kind of fire. Whether it is our own health, whether it was heart surgery or chemo or whatever, maybe it's the death of a spouse, the death of a loved one, loss of a job, whatever. We've all had fires in our own lives, and we've endured them. Nobody here said, forget that Christian stuff, that ain't worth a darn. Everybody's here despite the fires that we have endured. And then it goes on to, how can we cling to intangible faith when our world feels like it's crumbling?
God is there.
Prayer, because God is in charge. And question number 3, how has your faith been strengthened after overcoming a trial? You feel like your faith has been strengthened after overcoming a trial? Yes? Well, we move on to the lesson itself. And, oh, JoAnn? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And so now we have a story about these 3 gentlemen and irritating King Nebuchadnezzar. And so would someone like to volunteer to read verses 19 through 23?
Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Might speak up just a little bit.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the blaze of the fire let the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace.
All right, thank you very much. So, why were these 3 going to be thrown in the furnace? What had they done?
Bow to the golden idol.
They refused to bow to the golden idol that King Nebuchadnezzar had made, 60 cubits tall and 6 cubits wide, or whatever it was, some big statue that was supposed to represent the god that Nebuchadnezzar worshipped. And everybody was supposed to bow and show allegiance to that god. And these 3 gentlemen, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had become kind of important in Babylon, they were part of the group of Jews that had been taken from Israel and taken to Babylon, and they must have worked in accounting or whatever for, the royal family, and they had refused to bow. And of course, then people said, "Hey, these 3 guys that you got working for you, they didn't bow," and everybody saw that they didn't bow. So you got to do something. And so Nebuchadnezzar decided what he was going to do. How did King Nebuchadnezzar react? Well, 2 ways. His initial reaction, which is not in the scripture, but do any of you know what his initial reaction was? It's in the scripture just a couple of verses prior. He gave him a second chance. I've heard that you guys wouldn't bow down, so, do it now and everything will be all right. And of course, they kept their same response. Nope, we're not going to do it. So then after that, how does he react? He's furious. He's very, very mad. You didn't do it when you were supposed to. And now you haven't done it when I've given you another opportunity to rectify the situation. You're defying me, and I'm King Nebuchadnezzar. And so he's not going to allow it. How did he express his rage? Turned up the heat, literally. Made the furnace 7 times hotter. It must have been very, very hot. And then, of course, what happened to the three gentlemen? They got tied up, bound, and thrown into the furnace. What's that? Yes, after they were inside, yes. What happened to the soldiers that threw them in? They got burned up. It's a heck of a job. You're following orders, doing what the king tells you to, and you got to take these guys and throw them into this very, very hot furnace, and it costs you your life. So it must have been like his personal guards, the big, strong men it talks about, and they died as a result. But not our three heroes of the story. Now, the next scripture, I thought maybe we divide into two parts. It's just a little bit longer than the other one. So if one of you would take verses 24 through 26, and then somebody else can jump in on the last couple of verses, 27 and 28.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the straps perfect.
Somebody else can take over from there.
Okay, right.
I know, it was bad timing on my part.
And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. But Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their loss rather than serve or worship any god except him.
All right, thank you for good reading, good teamwork there. So now we have the gentleman inside the furnace, and what did King Nebuchadnezzar notice? 4 men instead of 3, and what else did he notice? Yes, that one looked like the Son of God. And he also, of course, noticed that all of them were still in there. They were all 3, 4 alive. And they weren't being burned. They weren't bound up anymore. In fact, they looked like they were doing all right. And Nebuchadnezzar just couldn't hardly believe it. And we did, question number 8, who else did he see? We've already got that. He's the 4th person. And he called that person the Son of Gods. Later, he talks about it must have been an angel. But maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was Jesus himself who was there to save them. But they were saved because of their faith in God and their willingness to risk death to show their faith. It doesn't mean that you could count on God to save everybody that risks their lives to show their faith, because we don't know his plans. But in this case, it was. Question number 9, how did Nebuchadnezzar